I'm going to be looking at the leaks in the book through the lens of, does this actually change anything that we already thought about the members of the royal family, as well as Harry and Meghan? Stay tuned to the end of the video where I'm going to be talking about a few things that we probably didn't need to know. Harry's book Spare was released early in Spain, 5 days ahead of the official release date, and currently UK booksellers are on strict embargo not to release the book early. But we've got a few revelations from the book which I want to share with you in today's video. He's going against a motto that's at the very core of the royal family, which is never complain, never explain. Harry is full of so much anger and resentment. The biggest irony is that he seems to hate that he was born as a spare. He seems to hate that he was born into the royal family, yet that is exactly what he's using to profit and make millions of dollars off of who he is. It's currently estimated that his net worth is sitting at $60 million, 20 of that which came from writing his book Spare. First, let's talk about the relationship between the two brothers. One of the things that's most commonly been said in the media is that the breakdown of the brotherly relationship happened because of Meghan. But in the book, Harry himself says something that directly contradicts that. He talks about William's 2011 marriage to Kate and how he felt he lost his brother that day. In fact, he directly says he was gone forever. And it's clear that the brothers have a complex relationship. Harry calls William both beloved and his arch nemesis throughout the book. And it's true, sibling relationships can be really complicated, especially in a situation that these two find themselves where one is the heir and one is the spare. And certainly throughout their lives, they would have been treated differently and people would have responded to them differently based on this difference in status. I can't help but think part of the reason that Harry ended up with Meghan was just out of sheer frustration of not being recognized or always being second to William and having to stir things up and do this incredibly rebellious act just to be noticed for something. When did the true rift actually begin between the brothers? So according to what he says in Spare, his brother was gone after his wedding to Kate. Why does he try to frame it as William not liking Meghan as the reason? And he certainly does talk about an incident where William comes into Nottingham Cottage. He talks about how Meghan is rude and abrasive, and then he comes at Harry, pushing him down on Harry's dog's bowl. The bowl breaks into his back. As William leaves, he calls Harry by his nickname Harold and tells him, "You don't need to tell Meg about this." So my impressions, yes, I didn't really know that Prince William had that temper, and certainly that's something that the royal family would want to keep under wraps. I think calling this assault is possibly a bit of a stretch. Certainly it's an altercation between siblings. I feel like William was just so frustrated by how Harry was acting and how Meghan came in and just thought she could restructure the entire royal family. At the same time, do I think it needed to get physical? No, I don't. There's obviously something in these two brothers' history around how they've related, and maybe they have always, kind of wrestled and physically fought when they're trying to work out things, when they're pissed off at each other. Harry still seems especially affected by Diana's passing, and it's true, I don't think you ever get over the early passing of a parent. Him and Meghan's actions continue to bring pain, conflict, discord, and just overall negativity to their families. Now, I can't help but feel a lot of this book comes across as immature and like a teenager who's trying to rebel against their parents and give them the middle finger and say, you know what, I don't care what you say, I'm gonna do what I want. So obviously the main aim of writing this book is making millions of dollars, but let's hear what Harry actually said in summer of 2021 when Penguin announced they were going to be publishing his memoir. "I've worn many hats over the years, both literally and figuratively. My hope is that in telling my story, the highs, the lows, my mistakes, the lessons learned, I can help to show that we have more in common than what we think, no matter where we come from." Honestly, I feel like Meghan wrote that. That doesn't even feel like how Harry speaks. And to me, honestly, it's somewhat laughable that somebody who comes from one of the most powerful families in the world is trying to frame themselves as highly relatable, especially after what's happened the last few years with Harry and Meghan. Harry continues to villainize other members of the royal family, from his father, King Charles, to his brother, Prince William, to his sister-in-law, Princess Kate, to Queen Consort Camilla. And so let's look at some of the evidence he uses and whether I think he actually succeeds in lessening our image of those people. Let's talk about timing. The timing of the Netflix documentary in this book is especially cutting, given that King Charles' coronation is coming up in May, and he certainly has a lot to say about his father in the book. In fact, I would go so far as to say that his brother and his father are the two main targets of this book. It's truly time for Harry to take accountability for his own actions, to stop playing the victim, and to realize he's had just as much of a hand in this conflict as anybody else in his family has. Let's talk about the relationship between Harry and King Charles. So in the book, Harry paints a picture of Charles as cold, detached, and sometimes cutting in his remarks. He talks about how his father would often make jokes about his parentage, even though Harry declares in his book that Diana met Major James Hewitt, who is sometimes speculated to be his biological father, long after he was conceived. Charles would even go so far as to say, "Who knows if I'm even your real father?" I could admit that any child hearing that from a parent, that would be very disturbing. It's really not funny. So I think in that instance, he did succeed in making Prince Charles look bad. The story about Charles's efforts to reconcile the two brothers at Prince Philip's 2021 funeral, and he said to the boys, "Please don't make my final years a misery." In fact, Harry even goes on to detail a private meeting where he talks about how his father and brother seemed genuinely puzzled about why he decided to leave for America. So it's interesting how Charles makes the statement about him. He doesn't say, "I just want you two to get along. I just want you two to be in each other's lives." He says, "Don't make my final years a misery." So it's clear that he's upset to see that there's a rift between the two brothers, but there is also this element that it's about protecting his image too. Harry says in the book that both him and his brother didn't want his father to marry Camilla, and he was skeptical about meeting her, worrying that she'd be like the evil stepmothers he'd read about in fairy tales. He even compared it to getting an injection and told himself that he just needed to close his eyes and get it over with. Based on what I've researched, it seems like the relationship between the brothers and Camilla is cool, if not cordial, but it's certainly not a familial type relationship. It's very clear that neither of them see Camilla as a replacement mother figure for Diana. Harry circles back to a comment that King Charles made after his birth, where he tells Diana, "You've given me an heir and a spare, my work is done." This ongoing theme that I see with the documentary and with this book is that Meghan is very much trying to put a wedge between Harry and his family, but at the same time, Harry seems to have so much anger and upset towards his family and who he is as well. There's a really interesting anecdote where he foreshadows how he would act in later years, and he talks about trying cocaine at the age of 17, and he talks about how he didn't really feel anything and he wanted to try anything that would alter the pre-established order. Now, if that's not foreshadowing what him and Meghan did, I honestly don't know what is. It to me shows that sense of boredom and entitlement and wanting to rock the boat. I get this sense throughout the whole book that Harry feels throughout his life he hasn't been noticed because he's been in the shadow of his father and his brother, and he turned to rebellion in order to get that attention that he sought. Talk about two things Harry says about Diana in the book. The first one is, and this one to me was genuinely heart-wrenching, is he drove through the Paris tunnel where she was killed in order to try to get closure. To me, that was a very earnest moment, a very sweet moment of a child trying to connect with his mother. The next anecdote is a little more sketchy. Harry talks about being referred to a woman in LA who helped him communicate with Diana from beyond the grave. And the message that he got from her was, "And Diana's happy for you and you're living the life that she wants you to live." Now, I don't know about you, but I feel like psychics have a tendency to tell you what you want to hear. And I don't necessarily agree that he's living the life that Diana would want him to. There's an interesting quote that Harry gave in a clip leading up to the ITV interview coming up on January the 8th. He told British journalist Tom Bradby that, "I want a family, not an institution. I miss my brother and I miss my father." I don't know about you, but I feel like the wrong way to go about a reconciliation is writing the dirty laundry of the people you want to reconcile with and making it public. So this is where it takes me back to questioning everything that Harry is saying, questioning whether he is genuine, and questioning whether this is actually coming from him or from Meghan's mouth. There was a few anecdotes he shared that personally I didn't feel added to the overall narrative, and in fact were just a little bit cringeworthy. So one of them is he watched back Meghan Markle's sex scenes on Suits. Another is a story of him losing his virginity to an older woman in an open field behind a pub. But to me, that just kind of makes him look like a creepy pervert, and so I don't feel like that needed to be talked about. In fact, there's an incident where he turns something he did and tries to make other people look bad, and that's when he wore a Nazi costume in 2005, and he did admit that it was one of the biggest mistakes of his life. But in the book, he talks about asking Will and Kate whether he should wear the costume or not, and they responded with raucous laughter. And so in saying that, he's somehow trying to implicate them in his decision, but at the end it was his decision to wear the costume, and he's the one that has to own up to it. So that's exactly what I mean, right? We see incidences of that all throughout the book. He also talks about his 10-year military service and how many people he actually killed. I just felt this wasn't information that really needed to be shared, and I don't feel like this is information that anybody asked for. He says that he was neither proud nor ashamed of it, and that it seemed essential for him to be comfortable with that figure, which was 25 people. Harry is far from the first royal to write a memoir, but he's arguably one of the most influential to have ever done so. His great-grandfather, Edward VIII, wrote a memoir called A King's Story. Wallis Simpson wrote her own memoir called The Heart Has Its Reasons. Though Diana and Charles never officially authored their own biographies, they worked closely with authors who used them as the primary source. In Diana's case, it was Andrew Morton's 1992 Diana, Her True Story. And in Charles's case, it was The Prince of Wales, a biography released in 1994. Sarah Ferguson also released her own book in 1996 called My Story. What you'll notice about the bulk of these biographies is they're written by people who were not part of the royal family anymore. The only exception to that is Charles, and in Charles's case, given the timing of it 2 years after Diana's biography came out, it really seems like more of a rebuttal or a publicity effort to save face and cast himself in a certain light. And in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if another biography of Charles came out prior to the coronation as somewhat of a sly rebuttal to some of the things that Harry has said in his book. I'll be talking about more revelations after his 60 Minutes and ITV interviews come out this Sunday, but let me know what's your overall impression of the book so far. Do you think that it actually makes Harry look good? Because to me, I think it just makes him look bad. I don't feel like my opinion of anybody he talked about in the book actually changed, except maybe thinking Meghan is even more devious than I thought she was before. Maybe just that part changed. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.